What's up, Internet? I'm a guy in a chair watching horror movies. I just finished 2015's The Lesson, written and directed by Ruth Platt. This movie was terrible. The only lesson to be learned was that if you're going to make a horror movie about teachers getting revenge on students whom they hate, focus on blood and guts and violence, and don't actually try to teach anything. I will give the movie that it lives up to its name, and that if you pay attention to it, you will learn things by the end of the movie. But it's painful to do so because you're trying to watch a horror movie. If I wanted to learn things, I would learn things perhaps in a different milieu. Or maybe this was all some sort of pedagogical slash art project trying to combine teaching the audience something with a horror movie, because the story revolves around a threadbare, worn teacher who is enmeshed in the British public school system, and it's rendered very sort of Pink Floyd esque. We don't need no education. Pardon my awful Cockney accent there. And the place is a nightmare, and he's trying to teach, and these kids are in just sort of like open, defiant anarchy. One, I don't know, sugary second away from flinging their own poo at him and things like that, and he has a breakdown. And anyway, two particularly troublesome young delinquents are waylaid by said teacher after, a day or two, and then taken to his lair where they're subsequently tortured. Well, meanwhile, there's another plot thread running where one of them, the two boys, the one to whom you're supposed to be most sympathetic, is living with his older douchebaggy brother and his brother's girlfriend in their flat and stuff. And you can tell there's chemistry between the brother's girlfriend and the main male protagonist. Which, okay, I mean, not unusual, I guess. Hey, Arrested Development even had a plot line like that, but it comes off kind of strange in this movie. You almost feel bad for the douchebag brother because he's the only one with an actual job trying to work hard, and they pick on him for it. I mean, granted, he sells TVs and he acts like he's a member of parliament, but he's the only one working, and he makes a point about that. And they sort of like go behind his back and cheat on him, basically. And it makes you feel bad for the douchebag. So you know the writing is going to skew when that happens. Anyway, this young lass can't stop thinking about her boyfriend's younger brother, and so she goes in search of him. A person whom she admits on repeated occasions is just a boy, and I would never have anything to do with him, except that I'm in love with him secretly. And so she goes in and finds him, and ultimately they overcome said villain, and everything is fine. It's what happens in the middle of the second act that makes this movie terrible, because it has moments and potential for some real cool gore and effects, and there are some really tense moments and some really cringe-worthy moments involving a nail gun, things of that nature. It happens, and you wait for it to like sustain itself, but instead, the writer director Ruth Platt allows her main antagonist, the crazy teacher, to just launch into a sort of stream of consciousness, but actually cogent description of how humanity is awful, and it runs the gamut from the medieval era through the Age of Enlightenment, through the Industrial Revolution, and we hear from people such as Thomas Hobbes and Charles Lamb, with whom I wasn't really that familiar before, and now I am, and I'm annoyed by that. I regret that very much. I feel like that was the lesson. I learned more about Charles Lamb, and I can better quote Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan now, slightly, and ah, my there's no better litmus test than a 12-year-old boy's keen sense of like what is a good horror movie. And my son had wandered in and getting out of school and was watching like about the second act into the third act of this movie, and he turned to me and was like, "Please, can we change it? I just left school. I don't want to learn anymore." And so that gives you a sort of a sense of what's going on in that movie. I learned a lot, but not what I wanted to learn about cool teacher revenge on awful students. And then in the third act, it feels really strange because there's a natural ending point when they defeat the villain and where the movie should have ended. And instead, writer director Ruth Platt keeps things going along. And it was reminiscent of the quote from Dean Lerner in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place when he says that anything without dialogue was up for slow motion and editing, because there's just an extended slow motion sequence, a long section without any dialogue. It's all sort of the coda to everything, but it's just silent, and there's hip techno music playing, and you wonder what the hell any of it means or what point any of it has. And that's about the point when I sort of begin to feel bad for the brother, because it's really all about the young girl and the young boy getting together, or the teenage guy getting together, and they finally consummate their relationship at the very end of the movie, which is not how a horror movie is supposed to end. That's not how romance movies end. So doing that was a very strange message in terms of the narrative structure. You expect the protagonist and the two people to, I don't know, couple somewhere along the way, but not at the very end of the movie. Like the whole movie had been building to that, and that's when you sort of feel just bad about for the brother who gets thrown out of his own house. I will admit, by these two young upstarts who managed to do nothing more than finally overpower and drive into the literal grave the teacher whom they had already sent there bit by bit every single day of his working life. You feel bad for the teacher. You feel bad for the brother. Uh, there are lessons to be learned, indeed, Ruth Platt, in your movie. Next one.